When I started Guild Wars 2 all the way back in 2012, the game had a buy-to-play model and we didn't have the option to play for free. But now, the game is free to play and offers expansions which introduce mounts, elite specializations, new maps, a new class, new stories, and much more. Now the question is, where do you start? Should you buy an expansion? Which class should you play? What is the end game? Is the game populated enough to do anything? I'm pretty sure all these questions have been raised in your mind as a new player who is planning to start the game or has already started playing Guild Wars 2. So now, 11 years later, with all the existing features in the game, here is what I would do if I were a new player starting off in 2023. Probably the most traumatizing thing that an MMO player can be asked to do is choose a class. I mean, I have to choose between 8 classes, 9 if you have an expansion, and stick to one? Well, in Guild Wars 2, you don't have to worry about that so much. This is because the traditional Holy Trinity where one class can be a healer and the other can be a tank or DPS does not exist, to some extent. Every class can spec themselves to be a damage dealer, healer, or tank. Now, obviously, some of them are better than others at a particular role, but almost all classes can play whichever role you choose. On top of that, most items in your account are bound to all your characters, with a few exceptions. Getting gear is easier than ever now as ArenaNet, the developer of the game, keeps introducing new methods to obtain exotic armor, which is the second best armor type in the game when it comes to stats. Your entire bank, material storage, gold, and other currencies are shared in your account as well. So, if later down the line you decide to change a character, it is not as hard as other games where you have to reinvest the same amount of time that you put on your first character. Now, while still on the topic of classes, if you are not new to MMOs but are trying Guild Wars 2 for the first time, I would like you to set aside all your expectations of how you think a class plays. In Guild Wars 2, an elementalist, which is traditionally defined as a mage in other MMOs, can carry a sword, a warhorn, and even a hammer. The class can be both melee and ranged glass cannon, or even a healer. For this reason, when you are choosing a class, go with your gut feeling. If you think this class is cool, go for it. Don't overthink it and just pick.
Do it!
You will eventually find out how useful your class is, regardless of which one you go with. The issue that I had when I first started out is that I would reach level 40 or 60 and then change class because I'd say, no, this class feels weak, let me try something else. The funny part was, I was playing a condition damage staff elementalist, and the rest is history. Guild Wars 2 has over a decade's worth of content, and it can be extremely daunting and overwhelming to take it all up in one spoonful. So my biggest advice would be to take things slow. Guild Wars 2 has a horizontal progression system, so you won't feel like you are left behind after new updates roll out or after taking a long break from the game. The gear that you obtain will always be relevant. So, knowing that, I would recommend you guys to focus on exploring the core maps before trying to engage in any form of endgame content. Consider this as a tutorial for the game. You will get to know how dynamic events work, you will get a 360-degree understanding of your class and their fundamentals, and you will even unlock all the waypoints needed to traverse through Central Tyria whenever you need it later down the line. This is very important as you will be traveling a lot between maps, and by taking your time to explore and discover all the waypoints and new locations in the game, you will have one less thing to worry about, and you will be able to put all your attention in your account's progression and exploring the endgame. As a bonus, if you explore the entirety of Central Tyria, which is the base maps that you get without any expansion, then you will get two gifts of exploration. These items are used to craft legendary weapons, which will save you a lot of time in the future. Now, back then, we had it much harder than it is now. We used to have to walk 10 miles, then go into pits of lava, and then back up, and then swim for 2 hours before we can reach our destination. Yeah, that didn't make me sound like your dad, not even one bit. With the new player experience introduced in 2022, players can now get a Raptor mount for a 10-hour trial once you reach level 10. And if you own any expansion, instead of a 10-hour trial, you would get the mount permanently. And this will make exploration 10 times easier. In my case, I literally got 100% map completion maybe 2 years after I started playing the game. And going back to my first point, because I did so many characters, I'd have one character with 20% map completion, another with 30%, and you get the point. Now, fun fact is that all those characters are now deleted. Now, the question would be whether you should buy an expansion or not. The short answer is yes. Now, it's a matter of which one, and this really depends. Before we talk more about that though, let's talk about the concept of Living World in Guild Wars 2. Living World seasons are basically updates that introduce a new storyline, new maps, and new features to the game that are not groundbreaking. They are usually mini updates that happen between expansions, and the sequence goes like this. So you have Living World Season 1 and 2, and then the expansion Heart of Thorns, followed up by Living World Season 3, then Path of Fire, into Living World Season 4, and the Icebrood Saga, which was the last Living World that we got, and finally you have End of Dragons and Secrets of the Obscure. Now, if you want to enjoy the game the way it's meant to be enjoyed, by following the same sequence that older players had to follow when every expansion was launched, then I would start by following the sequence that I already mentioned previously. If you want to go for convenience, however, then I would recommend getting either Secrets of the Obscure or Living World Season 4. Either one of those two will allow you to get the Sky Scale, which is a flying mount that most players use. This will help you catch up to people in open world events, and you won't feel left behind. Guild Wars 2 is a huge game.
That's what she said.
And getting a hold of everything is pretty difficult. There are some tools that are developed by the community and are completely fine to use in-game, and some websites that will make your experience much easier in the game. For example, if you are not into theory crafting and prefer to use a ready-made build, then you can use MetaBattle, a website that allows you to filter out builds based on class, elite specialization, and even game mode. If you are a theory crafter though, you can use guildwars2skills.net to create your own builds. Another one would be Guild Wars 2 Efficiency. This website helps you monitor everything you have in your account by plugging in an API key that you can get from the official Guild Wars 2 website. And you can also see the prices of items in the trading post in real time so that you can make better buying and selling decisions. You even have the Fast Farming community, which is a website that allows you to see the best and fastest ways to farm a particular thing in the game. There's also a bunch of in-game tools like Blish that does a million things, or ArcDPS that adds a DPS meter to the game. All those are developed by the community for the community, and I will leave a link to each one of them in the description below. And no, I am not sponsored by either of them. Now, when the game was still in its early release stages, the endgame was fairly simple. We only had player versus player, world versus world, and dungeons. Right now, though, there is a massive list of things that you can consider endgame. To name a few, you have raids, open world, player versus player, world versus world, fashion wars, fractals of the mists, and much more. Dungeons are now not really part of the endgame, as they are considered to be outdated and not worth the time to gold ratio. I would personally still do them as they bring back old memories, but ArenaNet, please, a rework would be nice. In other words, Guild Wars 2's endgame can be enjoyed whether you prefer large or small scale PvP, PvE, or even casual exploration. I would like to stress on one thing though, and this is Fractals of the Mists. These are a type of dungeon, but not to be confused with the traditional dungeons that are in the game, and they can be accessed from right over here in Lion's Arch. The way they work is the following. You have 100 levels of difficulty, and as the difficulty increases, you will need more of a stat called Agony Resistance. The less agony resistance you have, the more damage you take from the fractals. The only levels that don't need agony resistance would be levels 0 to 20. Now, one more thing is that you can't access a fractal past level 1 if you did not complete the level 1 fractal yet. And you can't access the level 41 if you didn't complete the level 39, and so on. This can only be bypassed if you join a party who already has a player in it who completed said level. So, my advice here would be to put some time into participating in the low level fractals and build up your own fractal level, as you will need it later down the line. Besides, this is where you get one of the legendary back items and a gear rarity called Ascended, which is basically the strongest gear in the game stat-wise. Now I say all this because in the early stages, there was only 40 fractal levels, and players were already familiar with each one and how they work, and they had already built up their agony resistance, except obviously for yours truly, who was late for the boat. It wasn't until October 23rd, 2015, when the big Fractal update rolled out and the 100 levels were introduced, before I actually started participating in this activity. Okay, so almost every MMO that you will play will involve some kind of group play and social interactions where you have to deal with people in order to complete something. Let's take endgame raids or fractals as an example. If you want to efficiently complete them, then you will probably need a decent group. Now, you can still complete those activities by using the group finder and joining random groups, but the feeling of completing it with a bunch of likely minded people from a guild or a small group of friends gives you a different sense of achievement and enjoyment. Moreover, you will have a sense of, oh, I want to progress further in the game and be better so that I can be the best in my guild. And this will push you to actually do more and spend more time in the game, all while enjoying it. By having a guild, you will spend less time worrying about finding players to do endgame with in an efficient way and more time actually doing that endgame. Now, out of my 17 to 18 years of playing MMOs, this is probably one of the most wholesome community that I have come across. The thing is, it took me some time before I was able to process all this. For me, it took quite some time to join a guild. Maybe it was back in 2014 when I joined my first guild. But again, this is because I was playing with two of my real life friends, so you might not have the same situation. So, my recommendation, join a guild. Guild Wars 2 is a chill game. And this is only if you are not putting yourself in a constant treadmill where you want to be the best. I've quit and rejoined the game more times than I can think of at this point. And I am sure that this is the case with most veterans out there. There is just this one thing that keeps pulling us back in. I think that due to how the game is built and the horizontal progression that it has, there is no sense of competition when it comes to playing the game casually. And I believe this is how all MMOs should be. Now, I say this because the MMO genre is changing, and now it is not tailored for the younger generation anymore, and is mostly populated by people who are within the 20 to 40-year-old range. Basically, the ones who were there when MMOs were at their prime. For this reason, it is okay if you feel burnt out from playing the game for so long. If you want to take a break and try new things, then you can do that. You don't have to worry about losing your progress because when you come back, whatever you own will 99.9% still have the same value. If you come into the game with this mentality, odds are that you will have less chances to feel burnt out. Just learn to appreciate the small things that the game has to offer. It is not a marathon and it is somewhat different from other MMOs. So, now that you know what you know, I hope you go into Guild Wars 2 with a different perspective. If you enjoyed this video or got some value out of it, consider subscribing. This shows me that you guys are actually interested in the content that I'm pushing out. And I will see you guys in Tyria. Peace.